Good evening, everybody, and welcome to today's daily devotional. So our daily devotional today to end the week is going to come from Ephesians chapter 4, starting in verse 17. Paul, after he has kind of focused on the first half of chapter 4 on the growth of individuals, but more so growth of the church, growth of the congregation in Ephesus. He focuses the latter half of Ephesians chapter 4 on the growth of the individual, the need to grow to the point where you're no longer serving the desires of your heart, sinful desires of your heart, and so forth. And really, you can kind of cut the latter half of Ephesians 4 into two, and in fact, that's what we're going to do. We'll probably pick up Monday with the second half. But verses 17 through 24 are more conceptual. They're about the old man versus the new man. Here's what you used to be. Here's what you should be now. And then verse 25 through the end of the chapter 4 focuses on practical application of what that means. Be angry but sin not, and so forth. So starting here in verse 17, it says, "This I say therefore and testify in the Lord, that you should no longer walk as the rest of the Gentiles walk, in the futility of their mind." So from the very beginning, Paul, and it's obvious Paul he's not just addressing the Gentile brethren. Obviously, any Jewish brethren there would be a part of it as well. But primarily, there's going to be a lot of Gentile brethren in the congregation there at Ephesus. And so when he says that you should no longer walk as the rest of the Gentiles walk, in the futility of their mind, whether or not he's addressing specific issues among the brethren in Ephesus, or he's simply encouraging them to not fall into that, I tend to think that there probably was either some issues, or at the very least some potential issues that Paul is trying to encourage the brethren in Ephesus to avoid, or to kind of head off at the pass. Remember, Paul spent quite a bit of time in Ephesus, and so he, perhaps even better than most other congregations, except maybe the Corinthians, Paul probably spent the most time, at least as an apostle that we know of, in Ephesus at any given time. And so he knew these brethren very well. He knew their minds, he knew their hearts, he knew kind of what they struggled with. And so when he says that you should no longer walk as the rest of the Gentiles walk, in the futility of their mind, he's going to take verse 17 and 18 and describe the problem with the way the Gentiles think. And by Gentiles here, again, I tend to think of this. There's several times in the New Testament where the term Gentile isn't just used as a contrast to Jew. It's used as a contrast, or used more in the definition of godless. So, because even the Jews served Jehovah, okay, even though they served under the old law, and many of them refused to change from that, they did know Jehovah, as opposed to the Gentiles who served idols. And so there are a couple times in the New Testament where when the term Gentile is used, it's used more in the definition of the godlessness of people, of the Gentiles. And I kind of get the feeling that that's kind of what he's dealing with here, that you should no longer walk as the rest of the godless people. Okay, in the futility of their mind. Why? Well, what's the futility of their mind? Well, their minds are focused really only on what they want. Their minds have been trained, they kind of train themselves into thinking what is good for me, what I desire, what I want, and then to give themselves to that. Verse 18, having their understanding darkened, being alienated from the life of God because of the ignorance that is in them, because of the blindness of their heart. You could say that Paul's being pretty harsh, and he is, but he's painting a picture of, again, this is about contrast. Here's what you used to be, and that's what he's going to get to in verse 20 and 21. Here's what you used to be, and here's what you should be now. And so he's painting this picture of the society of the godless. This is the way they think. This is the way they do things. Having their understanding darkened, which suggests that at one time they had proper understanding. And of course, this goes back to Romans chapter 1. Yes, they did at one time. Obviously not in that generation, but at one time all people knew who God was, who Jehovah was. But because they wanted to do what they wanted, because they wanted to give themselves over to their own desires, they created themselves idols, okay, and kind of defined those gods and idols the way they wanted to live their lives. And so Paul's really kind of looking at this in a broad conceptual way. He says their understanding is darkened. They no longer understand. Okay, that the generations since since I guess you could say Adam and Eve, of course, and then you kind of had the start over with Noah and his family. You know, all of mankind began in a holy, righteous place, or at least in an understanding of Jehovah, I probably should say. Adam and Eve understood who Jehovah was. Noah and his family understood who Jehovah was, and then it all went downhill after that. So when Paul says having their understanding darkened, being alienated from the life of God. Why? Because they're putting their devotion in idols and in what they want. Because of the ignorance that is in them, because of the blindness of their heart. Now notice the use of heart here, the blindness of their heart, which says that they are blinded because of what's in their heart. Okay, their hearts are focused on this world, on pleasure in this life, sinful pleasure, sinful lust, sinful desire, and that has blinded them to the true God, okay, to Jehovah. And this is part of what Paul deals with in Romans chapter 1, and leading up to chapter 3, verse 23, all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. So he goes on to verse 19, who being past feeling have given themselves over to lewdness, to work all uncleanness with greediness. This phrase, being past feeling, the phrase itself, it means grieved out, okay, which carries with it the idea of apathetic, no longer caring, no longer feeling anything. And it's not that maybe once that they did, and now they just have grown that way. In the sense of their society, in the sense of them, these godless people, in the way that they have kind of their society has evolved, they're past feeling. In the sense of having a consciousness of Jehovah, having a consciousness of a higher standard, having a consciousness of even basic morality in some cases, they've given themselves over to lewdness, to work all uncleanness with greediness. Lewdness, generally speaking, lewdness has, there's a sexual quality to lewdness, sexual desire. Uncleanness is a very broad term, that everything from serving idols would be unclean, to defiling themselves in sexual relationships, to lying, to thievery. All of these would be unclean. Covetousness, uncleanness is a very, very broad term, both in the Old and New Testaments, but in particular in the New Testament. And then with greediness, okay, you throw in there the addition of, and in greediness in this case, yes, money or possessions certainly would be a part of that, and that would be a little bit more specific than, because you got lewdness that covers kind of the more sexual quality of things. You've got uncleanness, which covers pretty much everything else, and then you've got greediness, which would cover kind of the desire for possessions, the desire for money. But all of these terms are very broad. Greediness doesn't have to just be about money or possessions. It could be about power. It could be about influence. It could be greedy for what makes me feel good. Okay, there's a lot of ways in which this is very broad. But he's describing He's describing the feudal nature of the society of the godless people, of the world, those who don't know Jehovah and those who don't serve Jehovah. Verse 20 is where he then pivots to talking about them in contrast to the Gentiles or the godless. He says, "But you have not so learned Christ, if indeed you have heard him and have been taught by him, as the truth is in Jesus." Notice the focus isn't about Paul. You have not so learned from me. Okay, now Paul spent he spent, was it 3 years in Ephesus? This isn't about Paul. Okay, if indeed you have heard me, you've been taught by me the truth, I've been teaching you the truth. No, this isn't about Paul. This is about Jesus. This is about Christ. If indeed you have heard him. Okay, this is what separates the godly from the godless. Those who hear Jesus. It's not just about Jehovah anymore. That sounded bad. Obviously it is about Jehovah, but now we serve Jehovah through Jesus. Okay, under the old law, Jehovah was all they had, and now we have an understanding of the Son of God, Jesus, through whom we serve Jehovah. And so, verse 20 and 21 describes the fact that being taught by Jesus, and there's a very crucial component here, being taught by Jesus doesn't just mean knowing the truth. Okay, notice what he's contrasting this. He's contrasting this with the mind and the heart of people. It's not just about knowing the truth, it's about applying the truth. Now, he's going to apply actions and ways in which people conduct themselves here in a little bit. But this is about the heart and the mind and the application within the spirit of a person, within the mind and heart of a person. It's not enough just to know the truth. You actually have to believe and be convicted and allow that truth to change how you think and what you put your mind into and your heart into. So verse 22, this is part of what Jesus has taught us, that if you put off concerning your former conduct the old man, which grows corrupt according to the deceitful lusts, and be renewed in the spirit of your mind, that you put on the new man, which was created according to God in true righteousness and holiness. Now, this is what Jesus teaches us, compared to what the society of the godless does and tries to teach, and kind of the whatever feels right is right type of thing. Verse 22, Jesus teaches us that you are to put off concerning your former conduct the old man. Okay, well, obviously you can link this to Romans chapter 6, because we are a new creature in Christ Jesus, or at least we're supposed to be. When we're baptized, we are washed clean. We are now someone who has devoted themselves to serving God, committing themselves to serving God. We are to be new in our conduct, but that starts in our thoughts and in our hearts. That old man grows corrupt according to the deceitful lusts. That goes back to the way the Gentiles, the godless, think. We are to be renewed in the spirit of our mind. Now, and obviously there's several different connections. The idea of being renewed or regenerated. And Romans chapter 12 is be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Obviously the idea of being renewed isn't just a one-time thing. Okay, and this part of what the application here is that this being renewed in the spirit of your mind, this is a consistent, this must take place consistently. This is something that has to happen routinely, daily even, that I continue to renew myself, renew my dedication, renew my commitment, renew my understanding of God's Word, continue to be reminded of what I'm here to do, to serve God. And in doing so, I put on the new man, which was created according to God in true righteousness and holiness. That moment in which I'm baptized, in that moment, okay, when I arise out of the waters of baptism, I am clean, I am pure, I am a newborn, Okay, that's why we say born again, although that's obviously been taken out of context and twisted into a whole new concept in the religious world. But a true born again Christian is one who has just been baptized, who has washed their sins away through baptism, and now they have committed themselves to serving God. And so when Paul describes, you put on the new man that was created according to God, okay, according to his, obviously his commandment of being baptized, but also according to his design, to his plan, in true righteousness and holiness. That's submitting to that standard of right and wrong, recognizing what it means to be pure in the sight of God, to be set apart in the sight of God. Therefore, okay, so verse 25, like I said, verse 25 through the end of the chapter focuses on practical application. It focuses on practical conduct of what that then means. But he focuses first on the contrast of the heart and mind of individuals, of the godless versus what the godly. Okay, here's the heart and mind of the godless. Here's what the heart and mind of the godly should be. And if your heart and mind is godly, then here's the contrast of behavior. Here's the contrast of the behavior of the godless. He's going to talk about putting away lying. He's going to talk about in verse 27, giving place to the devil. Verse 28, stealing, corrupt words. Verse 29. So, I mean, there's going to be a lot of other details and other components to this that he's going to get into. But it's all about this contrast here. And it's about, and again, this goes back, Ephesians chapter 4, if you're going to put a title to Ephesians chapter 4, it's a chapter about growth. Like I said, the first half of chapter 4 is about the growth of the congregation in Ephesus, which, you know, really, I mean, you could break that down to this is what the growth means for a congregation, how we're to work together, every joint does its share, and so forth. Every part does its share. But then the second half of chapter 4 is about the growth of the individual. And in a lot of ways, the need for us to keep that distinguishing thought or that distinction between the godless and the godly and what that means, and make sure we don't become part of the godless or those who don't think about God at all during the course of their day. Okay, in their mind and their hearts, they are only focused on themselves. And that is really what Paul's contrasting there. All right, so that's where we'll stop. A little bit longer today, I apologize. But we'll stop here. And like I said, Monday, we might pick up with verse 25 through the end of Ephesians chapter 4 and kind of notice how then Paul applies that contrast to actual conduct and behavior. All right, everybody, y'all have a great rest of the day. Have a great weekend. Please continue to keep in prayer those that we've mentioned, Norma Thurman, as well as Jan Tucker's granddaughter, Shirley Valter. Tom Armstrong. Keep all these in prayer, please, and let's make sure we ask God to be with them and those who are taking care of them. All right, everybody. Y'all take care. Lord willing, I'll see you Sunday. And if I don't see you Sunday, I'll see you Monday. Thanks, everybody.